Hey everybody, how's it going? This is Max with BuzzTox here, and I am back with my Game of Thrones Season 8, Episode 4 prediction video. Now before we get started, last episode we saw a couple things happen. First of all, the majority of people fled Winterfell because they knew the Night King was coming to Winterfell to attack. We see Sansa, Davos, Gendry, Missandei, Gilly, Brienne, and Podrick go to White Harbor along with all of the women and children of Winterfell. We then see Daenerys, Jorah, Tyrion, Varys, Grey Worm, and Jaime head to King's Landing. We see Bran also flee for the God's Eye, because he thinks it's a part of his destiny to further understand the Night King and how to defeat him. He's accompanied by Arya because she wants to plan to kill Cersei, and the Hound joins because he's a big guy who can carry Bran, and they need some muscle on this journey. And then that leaves the remaining characters. Jon, Tormund, Beric Dondarrion, Dolorous Edd, and all of the Northern Lords are left in Winterfell, and to hold it off until they're ready to start heading south to safety. But in Winterfell, everything went crazy. The Night King attacked. Winterfell was burned to the ground, Tormund died, Dolorous Edd died, and Beric Dondarrion sacrificed himself for Jon Snow to protect him from the Night King, really fulfilling his role and the reason why he's been left alive for so long. Bran had a revelation and realized Jon was the missing piece to ending this war. So in order to protect his brother, he warged into the Night King, and it gave Jon some time to escape on the back of Rhaegal. And now Bran is left in a coma-like state, where no one is unable to communicate with him. And because of Bran's move, the Children of the Forest were very upset and tried to attack him. They believed that Jon was the missing piece in letting the Night King go back north. So the children ended up attacking Bran, Arya, and the Hound. They barely made it back to the boat, and the Hound sacrificed himself and died fighting the Children of the Forest while Arya, Bran, and Sam made their way to shore. But now we go into episode 4. And this episode really starts at White Harbor. We see Sansa, Davos, Gendry, Missandei, Gilly, Little Sam, Brienne, and Podrick finally arrive at White Harbor. And as they're walking to the gates, Davos realizes that something isn't quite right. And then we see the gate open and Euron is there to greet them. He welcomes them to White Harbor and says that the Queen sends her regards. Euron then announces to all the civilians of Winterfell that their fake Northern King is the enemy of the crown. And he tells them that Queen Cersei pardons all of their actions for supporting this false king under her new rule, even though Euron says that he had other things in mind. We then see Sansa during this interaction whisper to Gilly and Little Sam to get behind them, trying to protect Gilly by not having her rounded up with all of the higher Northern Lords. All while Euron tells the Northern civilians that they're going to be sheltered and protected and given drink and food because of Queen Cersei's forgiveness. But then Euron takes Sansa, Davos, Gendry, Missandei, Brienne, and Podrick and puts them into cells. And while Sansa's in her cell, she hears a voice telling her that he's sorry and that he tried his best. And we find out that Lord Manderly is in another cell, all beaten and bruised, looking kind of defeated. And Lord Manderly tells Sansa that there's nowhere to go from here. The White Harbor that he knows is dead. His son is dead, his soldiers are dead, and all of his people are dead. He tells her that Cersei has taken away everything from him, and the Manderly name. But Sansa tells him over time, they will take back the throne and build a new rule in a better world. But Manderly just sees this as young optimism. He says that the world can only prosper for so long until we climb back into that hole. But then we go to a scene with Daenerys, Tyrion, Varys, Jorah, Jaime, all of that group who's on their way south to attack Cersei. And here they're really planning their way of attack. Tyrion says that Drogon should be patrolling the skies because he thinks Cersei has two options: to either hold up in King's Landing, or to take them off guard and fight them in open field. And Tyrion really thinks the latter, because his sister is psycho. And Jorah here questions how they're going to fight the Golden Company, because he knows that fighting against them is suicide and he doesn't want to create more dead for the Night King's army, kind of echoing Jon's concern. And then Varys speaks up and says that he recommends breaking the very foundation in which her contract with the Golden Company was founded upon. He knows that the Golden Company never breaks a contract, but he wonders if they can break the fundamental rules of the contract that they're signed up in. He tells Daenerys that Cersei must die at all costs, and her contract is founded on her sitting the throne. If there's no more Cersei, then there's no more contract. There's no one for the Golden Company to fight for, and then they would not break their contract. And Daenerys says she doesn't want to do anything rash, she doesn't want to hurt any civilians in King's Landing, and Tyrion echoes that he wants Daenerys to be safe because she is carrying a child. And here Jaime speaks up and argues that Cersei's better alive than dead, and he believes that instead of killing Cersei, she can direct the Golden Company efforts towards fighting the Night King. And here Tyrion and Jaime have an argument because Tyrion believes that Jaime's just blinded by love for their sister and doesn't really see her for who she really is. Tyrion believes it would just make them vulnerable for another Cersei betrayal. And Jaime just says he doesn't care because he doesn't give up on family. And then he looks at Tyrion and tells him that that's all he's ever done. And Jaime tells Tyrion that he has single-handedly hurt the Lannister house the most. And as Jaime storms out, Daenerys stops him with the Unsullied. And she tells Jaime that she'll let him go. But she gives Jaime a warning. Daenerys tells Jaime that he can try and get Cersei to surrender, but she warns Jaime that she is coming for Cersei. And if Jaime gets in the way, then so be it. But then we go back to White Harbor. We see Lord Manderly, Sansa, Davos, Gendry, Missandei, Brienne, Podrick, they're all dragged out to the Great Hall in White Harbor to see Euron. And Euron's just sitting in the chair casually as they're all thrown to the ground. He tells them that he needs to know the whereabouts of Daenerys and Jon, and he needs to know what they're planning. And Manderly speaks up, telling them that his King Jon will kill Queen Cersei. And Manderly keeps talking about Jon, how the White Wolf will never be found in the snow. And he tells Euron that he'll never know where Jon is, and he'll never know when to expect him. And while he talks, Euron signals to have somebody kill Lord Manderly. And then Lord Manderly gets executed. And then Euron has his men drag everyone back to their cells and tells them that they have one more hour to talk. We then see Cersei, Qyburn, and Harry Strickland discussing Daenerys' move. They know that she's making her way towards King's Landing. Cersei knows if they stay hidden in the castle, she'll lose credibility as a strong leader, and they can take resources as they come in. She knows the Dothraki are deadly in the fields, but because of the snow, she's more confident in looking strong and attacking Cersei in open field. So she makes her final call that Harry Strickland and the Golden Company are going to head north to fight off Daenerys and her army, with all the artillery that has been built to fight off her dragons. And the Lannister force is going to stay here in King's Landing with Cersei and fend off the castle. We then go back to White Harbor, where Sansa and everyone else is locked in their cells. And Gendry in this moment tells them that he doesn't know what anyone else is going to say, but he promises them that he won't say anything. And Sansa tells them that the last thing that she wants is anyone else to die. And Missandei says that she will do anything to protect Daenerys. And she believes that Daenerys will bring a lot of good into this new world. And if it means dying to protect that world, Missandei is willing to do that. And then Brienne promises Sansa that she will not talk in her own honor. And then Brienne warns Pod to keep his head down, don't talk, and do not piss him off. We then see Euron pull them all out again for the second round of interrogation to get them to talk. And before Euron says anything, Sansa offers herself up to Cersei for everyone else's safety. But he combats Sansa and says that she's going to Cersei regardless. And Euron says that Cersei cares about Sansa but not about the rest of this group. Euron grabs Gendry and asks him what he knows. And then he drops Gendry and is about to kill him. But Davos yells at Euron. Davos tells Euron that Gendry is the heir to the Stormlands, that he's Robert Baratheon's bastard. So in an effort to protect Gendry, he made him look like an asset to Cersei. Even though Cersei would want Gendry dead, Euron holds off because he's sure that Cersei would want to see Gendry. But then Euron turns to Davos and asks him who he is. And Davos just says that he's Jon Snow's ear and right-hand man. And Euron agrees and says that he saw Missandei and Davos at the Dragon Pit. And he knows that they have Daenerys and Jon's ear. So Euron says that he cannot kill them yet. But then he looks at Podrick and asks Podrick how important he is. We see Euron grab Podrick and Brienne starts to freak out. But before Brienne can say anything, Euron slits Podrick's throat. And then Euron tells them that they have one more hour until they see him again. And then everyone's dragged back into their cells. But after that, we go to Daenerys on her journey south to King's Landing. And we're going to see the Red Priests arrive with the Fiery Hand. And here we see Kinvara promise her men to Daenerys. And then Melisandre asks about Jon, but they say he is in Winterfell. And then we see Melisandre interact with Varys. Melisandre tells Varys that he's come to his senses. And Varys says that he hoped he wouldn't see her again. And she tells Varys not to worry. She tells Varys that Jon will return, because he must. And she tells Varys that he has spun his webs well. And she says because of Varys, Westeros is better for it. But then she pauses and says that he isn't. And she tells Varys that they both know sacrifices must be made for the good of the realm. And then Varys asks Melisandre what sacrifices she has made. And Melisandre says that she's made many, but there is one more sacrifice left to come. And then in the same place we see Bran, Arya, and Sam arrive. And here we see that Bran is almost in a coma-like state. He's unresponsive. So Daenerys makes sure to have Bran taken care of, and then listens to Arya and Sam's story. And they tell Daenerys that Winterfell's been destroyed and everyone is dead, and they do not know what Bran has seen. But Sam speaks up and mentions that the Children of the Forest wanted the Night King to take Jon. And that raises a lot of questions moving forward. But then we jump back to White Harbor, and we see Theon on his boat with his crew. And they look in shock at the Bay of White Harbor, and that it's full of Euron's boats. Theon tells his men that Euron cannot know that they're here, because they are outnumbered. And they need to look for the Silence. That's Euron's ship, and there's a small chance that they may be able to find Yara. So Theon and his men find the ship. They sneak on board. Theon tells his men to stay on the deck as he sneaks inside. And as he walks through the ship, he has his dagger ready. And he makes his way down into Euron's private quarters. And here he finds a figure. He finds a woman that's naked and tied up. They're bleeding, bruised, and beaten beyond belief. And as he approaches her closer and closer, he starts to realize that this woman is his sister Yara. Her hair is gone, she's missing fingers, and Theon tries to hold himself together and talk to her, but then he realizes that she has no tongue. She just blankly stares at him. So Theon cuts her loose and she falls to the floor, and he just sits with his sister, holding her. And he just repeatedly tells her how sorry he is, and he realizes that there's no life left in her.
Listen to me. If you're so broken that there's no coming back, take a knife and cut your wrists. End it. But if you're staying, Theon, I need you. And we're gonna take back the Iron Islands. Are you with me? Are you really with me?
Keeps telling her that they need her ruling the Iron Islands, and they're gonna get her out of there, but then he realizes she's just so unresponsive and out of the moment. So Theon makes the decision to take his dagger and slit her wrists. And he holds onto her and wraps her in a blanket and takes her so he can give her a proper burial. But here Theon makes the decision to not run anymore, and he accepts his role and his place as Ironborn. And Theon accepts that no matter what he does, he needs to kill Euron, because the only way out of here is for Theon to be the king of the Iron Islands. So Theon talks up his men and tells them that they must do this and kill Euron for Yara. We then go inside White Harbor, where we see Sansa, Davos, Gendry, Missandei, and Brienne, and they're dragged out back to the Great Hall for another sequence of interrogation. And by the end of it, Euron picks Brienne as the next person to be killed. But then the crowd erupts, and Theon is being dragged into the room by Euron's men. And Sansa's in shock to see Theon. And Theon tells Euron that he came for his sister. And as Theon's dragged in, Euron just laughs. But Theon then just pauses and says he came for him. And Euron laughs and just keeps beating on Euron. And Euron laughs and keeps beating on Theon. And Euron tells Theon that he is not Ironborn. And Theon kind of pulls himself together and murmurs that Euron isn't Ironborn either. And he tells Euron one thing. What is an Ironborn without any ships? And then we see it kind of click with Euron, and he sends men out and runs outside to the docking area. And while they run out, Theon pulls out his dagger and fights off Euron's men, and tries to scavenge their swords and give them to Gendry and Brienne to help fight. And then we see Euron run outside and see his whole bay of ships set on fire. And in anger, Euron gets his men and runs back in to fight off Theon. And as Euron runs back in the room to kill them all, Theon jumps from behind the wall, behind Euron, and starts to strangle him. But then the chaos starts to die down as all the Ironborn put down their weapons and watch the fight between Theon and Euron, seeing who is the most dominant Greyjoy. And Euron fought hard, he punched, kicked, bit, but Theon refused to let go, almost like he felt no pain, until Euron finally breathed his last breath, and then Theon let go and rised as the new king of the Iron Islands. And then he tells them that they're going to align with the Starks to help defeat Queen Cersei. And everyone cheers and chants, and Theon looks at Sansa and smiles. And then we see a scene with Theon and Sansa. They're escorting all their men on the ships to go to Dragonstone for safety. On the ship, Sansa thanks Theon and asks him what is next for him. And Theon tells Sansa that she must go to Dragonstone to protect her people. But Theon says that he cannot go with her, because he has to take care of something else. And Sansa asks what he needs to do. but Theon says he left an extra ship for himself and his Ironborn, and he needs to return Euron's body to make sure Jon sits the throne. Sansa, in shock, asks what he knows about Jon, and she thought that Theon was supporting Daenerys. And Theon simply says that he likes Daenerys, but Jon is his brother.
I do. You don't need to choose. You're a Greyjoy. And you're a Stark.
And then Theon pauses and says that he may have lost Yara, but he came here to save his sister, and he says that he succeeded, referring to the Starks as his true family. We see Sansa, Davos, Gendry, Missandei, Brienne, Gilly, and all the other northern civilians go to Dragonstone, and Theon and the Ironborn head in the opposite direction to take Euron's body to Daenerys and her group. We then go back there and see Jon arrive on the back of Rhaegal. They rush him off the dragon and put him into his own tent to tend to his wounds, and he ends up catching up everyone to speed on what happened with the Night King. Later that night, Sam came to visit Jon, and here they have a nice scene, but then Sam starts talking about the Night King. He says that he thinks he knows why the Night King wanted Jon, and why he tried to plunge the dragon glass into Jon's heart. And he says that it's the same reason he survived many Night King attacks and has defied all odds. Sam says that he learned a lot from Bran and his own studies, and he tells him that the White Walkers have a culture. Sam says that they know that they've taken Craster's babies, and they've had rituals for rebirths, just like what Jon experienced. Sam also tells Jon that Bran told him that the Night King has a strange fixation on weirwood trees and old gods. Sam says the point is that the Night King is not a creature, he is a being with a want and a purpose. Sam tells Jon that got him thinking about history, and then Sam talks about the War for the Dawn. He says that it's known that the children and the Andals fought back the Night King and then built up a wall to keep him from coming back. But Sam tells Jon that now it's starting to sound like propaganda, because right now thinking about defeating the Night King seems impossible. So Sam asks, what if Bran the Builder didn't build the wall? And what if the children and the Andals never defeated the Night King? And Sam continues on with the story. The story is said that Azor Ahai tempered his sword in water, and then in a lion. And then for 100 days and nights he built his sword and then plunged it into his wife. And then this sword became Lightbringer, and that was the sword that was used to defeat the Night King. And that sword was enough to push back the Night King. But then Sam says, the War for the Dawn didn't end in a battle. It ended in a sacrifice. He tells Jon that Azor Ahai never pulled a flaming sword from his wife. He pulled a child. Lightbringer. Lightbringer is not a weapon. It is a child manufactured for the Night King. A child burning with Targaryen blood. Sam thinks there is one more thing. He thinks this child was a product of ice, of Stark, much like Jon, and much like Jon's future child. Sam then warns Jon and tells him that him and his soon-to-be child are in danger. And Sam tells Jon that history repeats itself. The Night King will come again for 2 other Ice Dragon riders. This has only happened once in history. And Sam tells Jon that that's what he must have seen. Azor Ahai and his child Lightbringer being sacrificed. Sam tells Jon that Bran just wanted to protect him. But Sam says the one thing he doesn't know is why the Night King is after products of fire and ice. But then we see Jon get a bit emotional, and he restates the situation. The only way I can defeat the Night King is to sacrifice myself and my child. And Sam says that he believes so. And then Jon says that Daenerys and his child are the life that matters most to him. So Jon is lost and he doesn't know what to do. And that ends this episode. Thank you guys so much, and so sorry for the long wait. I'm going to be working very hard now on episode 5 and 6. I want to get it done as soon as possible so I can start doing regular videos. I feel like this series is awesome and it's very detailed, but it is a lot of work. So please let me know what you think in the comment section down below. And until next time, see you guys later.